Good afternoon. We will call to order this continuing session of budget discussion preparation that we have been engaged in for the last 3 days, 2 days. This is day 3. And so we are at the point now where we have received presentations from all of the department heads. And just before lunch, we received a little short presentation from the city manager showing us sort of some of the global topics that he is looking at with respect to finalizing the city manager's budget. There are some factors, of course, that are still somewhat to be determined. For instance, health insurance costs are usually not quite nailed down until a little bit later in the summer or closer to the time that we approve the budget. So there's a couple of those outlier things that may have a little flexibility to them one way or the other. But we're at the point now where the council is tasked with giving some direction to the city staff, having seen all of the individual departmental budget presentations. And so with that, I'm gonna open the floor up to comments from members of the council, and we can kind of proceed from there, either talking broadly or delving down into specific department budgets that you've seen that you might want to comment on or try to give some direction on. So the floor is open. Alderman Fuller.
Thank you, Mark. Just one broad level, real quick question, I think, for you, Harold. As you're writing your budget, like when the staff has been in here showing us some of the areas that they're cutting from or looking to cut from, are you implementing those into your budget that you're going to bring to us, or are we going to have to kind of maybe see some of that and not some of the other stuff?
So, Mayor Janser, Alderman Fuller, my preparation of the city manager budget will be a mix of probably all 3 options, depending on the materials provided and what potential impacts would be. We have a set number that we're trying to cut out of the budget, and so it's a variety of things. So I'm not likely to take many or all of the position cuts, but there may be other cuts, and those could have been recommended either through the flat budget recommendations or the -3% recommendations, or even some other things that weren't identified that as we as a management team looked at, that we felt that there was some trimming that could be done. And there may be some things in the 3% budget that we feel are transformational enough and create efficiencies that it's worth building into the budget. So it'll be a mix of all 3 of those that I'll be looking at to balance.
Well, and just to help clarify, the reason I was asking, I wasn't so much thinking about like the FTEs and stuff like that, but like the one-offs that a number of department heads had identified where, hey, we didn't use this the last 2 years, or this was budgeted last year, we can cut it out. Those will all be coming out for the most part?
More than likely, a lot of the recommended cuts will be taken.
Perfect. Thank you.
Alderman Olson.
I'm happy to start with my comments if you prefer.
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
All right. I do have a few points that I just want to go over. First off, thanks to all the staff who spent countless hours preparing a variety of scenarios for us to consider. The impacts and budget cuts in most situations were untenable, but it is helpful information for us to share with the residents when they suggest cuts. It is my opinion that when residents are aware of the impacts, they are unlikely to request them. We have seen this impact locally when DOGE cuts have been implemented. So my first priority is public safety. This is imperative for everyone who lives in or visits Minot. Funding for staff, their training, and their needed equipment must be allocated. I'm in favor of looking more closely at a public safety sales tax. Other communities in North Dakota have passed this sales tax because their residents also believe that public safety is paramount. I do not support the elimination of positions unless it comes through attrition and a thorough discussion on the impacts of the lost position. I think we must make a commitment to the police department facility so that they and the public know what our next steps are. My second priority is to fairly compensate our employees. No city services take place without our employees. We have departments, particularly the police department, that are understaffed. This creates issues internally and externally. Delayed services to the public and undue stress on our employees are just a few of the impacts that we see when we are understaffed. To top it off, many of our staff have endured an unhealthy amount of scrutiny this year. As the employer, we have a responsibility to make sure that we provide for those who provide for our entire community. I do not support a merit-based salary increase system. This may work in the private sector, but it does not work in the public sector. After we had the initial discussion at the dais, I heard from numerous residents that said that this is the very best way to kill morale, resulting in a loss of employees. My third priority is a maintenance to our infrastructure. This comes in a variety of ways: taking care of our buildings, our streets, our equipment. Sometimes the investment seems high, but we see numerous instances where underfunding something only results in good money being spent after bad. We recently allocated funds for an upgraded sound system at the airport. Many of us view the terminal as a new building, so we have a hard time seeing those requests come before us. The reality is that budget constraints during construction of the terminal meant that some shortcuts were taken. Now we have to pay for things again. Even in the building that we sit in today, HVAC equipment had to be fixed or replaced because the original budget didn't allow for replacement. Guaranteed, most equipment will be more costly a few years down the road. Finally, on this subject, prior councils have allowed neighborhoods to go without sidewalks and have allowed developers to put in subpar roads. Years later, we are paying the cost of these decisions. In addition to that, I do support some funding for the VERF. While I believe it is not a long-term fix, I will support the use of reserves to pay down some of the necessary costs. This fear was shared with legislators during the session that if a cap was put in place, many taxing authorities would max out the cap. From what we have seen over the past 3 days, I think it is nearly impossible to not see at least a small property tax increase. It is important to note that all of our property owners will see a buy down from the state, so even with a small city increase, there will be fewer dollars out of the household budgets. And last but not least, I think we have to consider and possibly reconsider the amount of money that is allocated to outside agencies. Each request that we receive is an important part of a successful community, and oftentimes we see the dividends. But as we consider core and non-core activities, these requests should be considered non-core. If there is a way to fund the requests without an undue hardship to our taxpayers, I would support the allocations as requested.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Olson. Other comments?
I can go next, Mark.
Alderman Blesson.
Okay, so I wanted to talk at the beginning just a little bit about the process that we've been through over the last couple of days. I was fortunate, and I applaud the city manager for including me last year as we were going through this process. It was a little bit different, but as a candidate, it opened my eyes and got me much more prepared for the process that was in front of us that went all the way through October. So I thank you for that. That was really important. And what I've seen over the last 3 days now is a significant step forward. So I think as department heads, as staff, and as a community, the city manager deserves a lot of credit for that because this has moved us in the right direction. With a couple of exceptions, department heads, the staff that have come before us to bring their thoughts on where this should go have been incredibly good. And I can't say how strongly I mean that this is exactly what this process needs to be. And I think it builds the kind of relationship and trust between the staff and the council that we need going forward. So thank you for that, all of you. The hard work, the effort. I know that it was not comfortable, and I know that it was not maybe a path that anyone would have chosen, But I hope we've now seen a lot of the fruit of those labors over the last couple days, because we have a much better understanding now, and I believe you have a much better understanding of what's going on within your budgets and what it would really mean if we were set in a position where we actually had to do the kinds of cuts that a -3 budget would require. You know, as our sales tax reliance gets higher and higher, we face that kind of question down the road. And while I understand that around the state there's been this move towards public safety sales tax, the only way that I can get behind that kind of thinking is, number one, once the taxing authorities around town have done their due diligence like our team has, to really move the budget to where it needs to be, to get to the point where we feel really good about the expenditures that are happening. Because up until this point, we have not had a revenue problem. We've had a spending problem. And so until we get the spending problem under control, I'm not a fan of new tax. What I will say is that I do think that there's a configuration. I think Alderman Fuller referred to this a little bit yesterday. There's been some thought in my mind about reconfiguring where we're at with our sales tax. I love the idea of dedicating resources towards public safety. But I think we might have to make decisions about other things that we're funding right now that maybe we want to take a different approach to or remove. And so I don't see that as an additional half cent. I see that as reconfiguring the half cent or the 2 cents that we've got today. So that's just some of my upfront thoughts. You know, my hope is that the hard work that's been done, this has set us up for a couple years now. We looked all the way out into 2028. And as we go through subsequent cycles of this, it's going to get better and better. And I think we're going to have a really good working relationship back and forth between staff and council about where we're headed with everything. So with all that in mind, I just want to throw out a few other things then that really struck me as we went through the last couple days. Number one of the other things I wanted to comment on real quickly is that this idea that the state has pushed down this 3% number. I mean, I've said this before. I was the one lone voice at the legislature in front of the House Tax and Finance Committee telling them what the problems were in this bill and where they were headed. The one voice. The League of Cities was a yes on it. They said, it's fine, let's move forward. The Association of Counties was a yes on it. It's fine, let's move forward. I was the only voice telling them that this was the kind of constraints it was going to put on everybody. I think everybody here understands that I am not a person who's for expanding the budget and going crazy in numbers. But this makes it much harder for us to do our job and do the people's work the way that we should. And that was my concern. I made that very clear to the legislators, and they heard me. With that in mind, though, what I think is going to happen is most of the vast majority of the entities out there are going to raise their taxes by exactly the 3% because that's the new constraint. Now, keep in mind, for many of them, that is a cutback because they've been averaging much more than that. And so that's part of the legislature's thinking here. I do get concerned, though, if we get the mentality among us that, oh, the people are about to get a $1,600 break, we got a little room to up ours. That backfill concept has gotten us exactly where we are today. That's why we are in the situation that we are in, where the work that the legislature has already done has fallen on deaf ears, essentially, and it hasn't helped the people whatsoever. So we need to be very careful about that. A few other things that I noticed as we went through this process. One of the things that I really loved is that we saw some department heads start to embrace the idea that we don't have to plan for every rainy day in every single budget. The easiest example I can give people is that we don't plan for the 25-year peak of snow events. We can't plan that way. That's the wrong way to go about things, because when we don't spend that money and we drop it in the general fund and it sits as reserves and we keep going the next year with the same high levels, we don't need to be doing that. We need to set ourselves up in a good spot so that we've got what we think we'll need. And in a high year, yeah, we might have a budget amendment. We just went through a couple weeks ago, we just went through a discussion around what our reserve levels look like. The council decided that it didn't want to make any changes to that we're going to allow ourselves to be right up to the state requirement or the state law requirements of 75% of our general fund budget. Again, I can live with that, but as I said yesterday, what I believe that sets us up to do when we run healthy reserves is to run a much leaner budget. Because when our department heads come before us, we can feel good about saying, yep, you did the right thing and you know you need a little extra for snow. We've got the reserves to take care of that. Let's get it done. Because at that point, we're making the right decision rather than telling the people, oh, by the way, we might have a big year, so we're going to need to collect extra snow money from you now in case we do. That's the wrong approach, in my opinion. And I think this heads us in the right direction if we follow through on that now. We can't do both sides. We can't say we need the higher budget because we might have a problem and keep healthy reserves. We need to do one or the other. If we've chosen this direction, then I expect us to move forward with it. So with that in mind, for this budget, what I'm hoping for is that the city manager's budget comes through and it looks pretty close to a flat budget. It looks within reason to a flat budget, keeps us underneath the 3% that we're allowed to use. And then what I'd really love to see us do is follow through on what the proposals that I brought last fall, which is to continue to pay down the overage that we already had. That was actually in excess of state law. The good news is that we've rectified that and we're on the right side of it going forward. But we do still have extra money that we've pulled from the people there. And then we take a look at simply in 2024, the extra money that we already collected. I'm still working through the annual financial report and I got some more work to do on it. But we're in another case where I'll say the same words that I normally say on this. We made a profit as a city again. We brought in more than we expended. And when we do that consistently, now from what I can see, that's at least year 8 in a row. When we do that, we've overcharged the citizens because we're not here to make a profit. And so we've got some monies to work with to buy down the property tax again and to continue that process. I can live with that. If we're going to do that consistently for a couple $1 million, but then we also do a buy down during that year, we can do that way forever. If that's how everybody feels more comfortable about it, as long as we're consistent, I can work with that. And so my hope is that we're able to do that. And so while, I understand people are going to get a break from the state and that's a good thing, I expect us to be at or below what our levy was last year, once we do the buy down and once we do the things the way that we should for the people. A couple other very specific things. One of the things that I heard throughout from department heads, and this hits home for me because not only do I have an engineering background and I understand that world to a certain extent, my son is a CPA and he's the head of our company. Without his CPA credential on the wall, we don't operate, literally. And he has continuing ed credits that need to be done every single year. That's the way that it works in that industry. There are many other industries. The city attorney talked about this. Lance talked about it. This is something that's got to happen across the board. What I would propose is that the city manager work with, whether it's HR or with the department heads, to come up with a policy for how we handle ongoing training that is required by credentialing so that we have a great plan for that. Now, does my son go to a 5-day conference every year for his CPA? No. In fact, in the years we've owned the firm, he's never done that. But I would like to see him do that at some point because I think he'll learn from that. But I think we could put people on a cycle where they might do the things online for a year and then they might go to the conference the next year because I think there is value in that. But I think it's really important that we handle that the same way across our departments so that all of our professionals are given the same opportunities and they're given the same means to meet those requirements as we go. Another thing that I'll address, we know that there's a ton of wage pressure. I've said throughout this process that for me, the 5% was a tall order, and I think the department heads all saw that. When you got a big built-in 5% increase in wages plus the benefit increases, how in the world do you even get to flat? It's nearly impossible, and I think you guys all saw that. And that's why for me, I will continue to advocate for performance-based pay. If we come back with a budget this year that does 3% increases, for our best people, the people that all of you absolutely cannot live without in your departments, 3% is not enough. I am behind you on that 100%. And that's why we can't make it across the board. We can't continue to do that because we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot as we get leaner. And so I will implore you, we need to move to performance-based pay to make sure that we don't have to do that. Does that mean that there are a few that are going to get less than the number? Yes, it does. And I think you can identify who that should be and how you should go about that. We're good. We have a good set of leaders here that can work their way through that without any problem whatsoever. And so I appreciate that. I think it's something that we have to continue to move forward with. I look forward to seeing what our consultants have on that as we take a look at it. I guess the last thing that I'll just say, one of the other things that I did notice throughout was that there was places where there's different levels of admin staff throughout our departments. I think as I look back in previous budgets 10, 15 years ago, Mark, you probably remember some of these. I think at one time there was sort of an admin pool. It was actually budgeted as a separate division or section to a certain extent. And I'm not suggesting that we go back there, but one of the things that I do think that we want to continue to take a look at as among departments is what's the best way to utilize those resources? Because we all know that. I mean, I have my daughter, I have the best admin staff I could ever imagine sitting at my front desk every day for our business. And she does things that make the world go round within our building. And that's some of the most important work that we get done. And so continuing to make sure that that work works and that we're paying an appropriate amount for it is one of the most important things that we can do. But it is a place where we got to be really smart and strategic about it, because it's really easy for those to get off track if we're not right on top of them. So just to sum up, I feel like this has been a solid process. And again, Harold, team, you guys knocked it out of the park for the most part. We had a couple places where I was maybe less impressed by the work that was brought forward, but man, did we have some great presentations, and we learned a lot about what was going on, and you're all to be commended for that, and I appreciate it very much. And I look forward to the work now we're going to get to do on this side of the table all the way through October. Thanks.
Other comments? Okay. Oh, Scott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Priority-wise, for me, is going to be the things that government should be doing. My top priority is public safety, like most of us, I believe, should be. There's been talk the last couple days about a half-cent sales tax for police and fire or public safety. My proposal would be that we take the first penny of our sales tax and take the property tax relief portion, the economic development portion, and the improvements portion, and make that a public safety sales tax. My reasoning for that is the property tax relief it's just a word on there. It goes back into spending anyway. We could designate that to public safety, and it is a reduction. It is a property tax relief at that point, because we're spending it on that and not taking it from property tax. Or we don't have to add more property tax. So that is my belief that is where we should go with this. I'm not for extending or adding new taxes. The other thing is the legislature did a $1,600 buy down for property tax. And I've heard many people, including the school board, that believes now they can collect more tax or add a levy for different things, or we can do more because but you have to remember that is just for primary residents. It's not for the businesses. It's not for the renters. As we raise it, they're going to get their taxes raised. I can't say that I agree it wasn't fair in how they did it, but that's the way it came out. So as we look at that, part of that is so that we wouldn't get taxed more and we'd get some relief. And now it seems like the local entities just want to add on to that, so then we're back to the way it was. So anyway, I think we have to start looking at our priorities as budgets get tougher. And we need to look at our staff, we need to look at our people, we need to look at what we should be doing for our citizens. I'm not for cutting staff on some of the proposals that were there, but we don't have to. We just need to be smart about it. So that's one reason why the sales tax, I think we just need to reallocate that to where it should be going, where our priority should be. And that's the services for the people and our employees.
Any other comments? Alderman Fuller.
Thank you. I'll just reiterate what Mike had said to the staff. You guys, department heads, all of your people that you guys worked with in your departments to do these budgets and bring these to us, you guys did a wonderful job. Like Mike said, I know it was tough. I know it isn't comfortable. And I just want to thank you from myself and from all the residents in Minot for doing it, because ultimately it's going to benefit them and us as a city. So we're very appreciative that you guys took the time and did it. You guys did an excellent job.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. First of all, I would like the citizens to know that I think the budget process, the budgeting process that we are using has improved dramatically over the last, I want to say, decade, because the amount of work and depth and discussion that goes into what the city council ultimately gets has been increased exponentially. We used to get a budget that sort of had two sections. It was, here's what we think the budget should be, and here's 40 employees that you can pick from to decide who you would like to increase positions or not. That was kind of how it landed. Well, as we know from the last 2.5 days, we're way better than that now. And I certainly want to join the chorus of comments from the dais here to the staff, to Harold, the heavy lift of the finance department to put this all together and give us a really good sight picture of where money can be saved, because we should do that if we can, but also where the needs are. I certainly agree with the prioritization of public safety. I agree with the prioritization of taking care of our employees. When you've got a department where 83% of your budget is people, you don't have a lot of room to minus 3%, especially with some assumptions of incremental costs of people. So I compliment all the department heads who ground through this exercise. I think it was the best one that we've ever done, and a healthy exercise. So I appreciate that. A couple of thoughts that I had related to the overall approach were there are a lot of questions about where we should accept additional risk and where we shouldn't. And I think to Alderman Blessam's point, the idea that certainly you don't have to budget for the 100-year snow event every year, but there are gradations of where risk becomes acceptable and where we should, pay now so that we don't accept too much risk. I think there's also a question that the city manager alluded to a minute or two ago, and that is that do we avoid spending money in a current budget to gain the technology that would move us ahead to our own detriment? And so I think we have to consider that carefully as well. Sometimes by saying, well, we can put off upgrading that software, or we don't need to send somebody to training to learn how it's done today, isn't the right approach, because in doing so, we just continually lose ground, and we sooner or later we end up with probably a larger expense and wishing that we would have made a different choice. So I think with those considerations and the ones that have already been mentioned, I think we're in a good position to look forward to the city manager's budget and then take it from there. I see that Alderman Pittner is online. Alderman Pittner, do you have any additional comments you'd like to add?
Yeah, can everyone hear me just fine?
We can.
Okay, so I'll just run through my notes here that I've kept with me over the last handful of days here. And again, I'll reiterate and echo what everybody said. Staff have done a great job. I think if anything, if it does nothing for anyone, it highlights how great a staff we do have going through this exercise. So I stated it before, my priority, I think, with this budget, when we talk about the constraints that we have, is taking care of what we have, and that's our employees. Pay and benefits to me is paramount. You know, when it comes to a merit-based pay system, I'm hot and cold on it. I don't know if that's the right way or not. I need to see more. I've heard concerns and I've heard benefits. So I guess that's just something we'll have to get more information on. Mike did a great job, and one of the notes that I have is training and staff. And we heard about the efficiencies, whether that's going to the conferences and finding out that we can buy refurbished buses. We don't have to go with new buses, and these different options. Brian Banfield highlighted some of the efficiencies that were located from some of these trainings that save real dollars for taxpayers. So again, I think continuing to engage in training for our staff and making sure that they have opportunities to advance, not only with the city of Minot, maybe it's for another organization. That's nothing we should shy away from. We shouldn't be afraid of training our staff to move on. One of the things we talked about was cutting, if we cut certain projects, one of the ones that jumps out today was sidewalks. Should we allocate those funds to other things? When we look at the priorities and the citizen satisfaction survey, some of those things were top priorities for citizens. I think if we remove those, we should give that money back. We shouldn't tax people for it. And we should save those funds for citizens. Public safety sales tax, I'm on board with having that discussion. Measure 4 put us on that track. That was part of the package that was Measure 4. If it did pass, was that municipalities and cities have alternate ways to generate revenue, whether that was through special assessments, whether that was through fees, pay for service, whether it was through sales tax. I'm not a fan of sales tax, to be honest with you. I think it adversely affects lower income individuals, but it is something that has to be considered. So again, Measure 4 honestly would have expedited that conversation versus what the legislature has enacted. So, and then we talk about reallocating, sales tax. I'm going to be an advocate. I think everybody knows me well enough that I'm going to be an advocate for economic development. Any good business owner knows that when times are tough, you don't get out of your marketing. You don't reduce that line item. That's something that you probably have to even invest more into at times if it allows it, because that's how you grow your business. That's how you generate more revenue. And like Alderman Blessum has stated, we maybe don't have a revenue problem. Maybe we have a spending problem. Well, I don't think that doesn't mean that we can't look for new revenues. We can't look to boost our sales tax. And that's what some of those relationships and those partnerships do. So again, I just don't want to see us undercapitalize our efforts, because I think we put ourselves in a bind and we start to move backwards. And again, this process, if nothing else, I think the staff have done this in the past. They've gone through these scenarios. They understand, they run a good budget. They follow the direction of council. This was the direction that we asked for, and they delivered. But I think it also goes back to what Finance Director Dave Lakefield has said at every budget process that I've been a part of, and that is, you need to manage your budgets. Just because you have funds doesn't mean you have to spend them. So again, and I think to the testament of our reserves, that's been happening. Our department heads have found cost savings throughout the year. They haven't spent those funds to where we've been able to have that cushion for some of these unseen and unprecedented expenditures or unprecedented world events, whether it was the boom or the bust that we went through, whether it was COVID-19. Those things, we protected the city from some of those things. And are there efficiencies, not budgeting for a 100-year snow event? Absolutely. I think those are things and those are steps that I'm fully behind. So again, I like the process. It parlays itself and it sets us up to have some really good discussions over the next few months, going through the budget process. And I'm excited to have those. But again, I'm encouraged by what we've seen, but there's a lot of work yet to do.
Thank you, Alderman Pittner. Any further comments? City Manager, do you feel like you got what you were after in this section? Or do you have any questions that you want to pose at this point for clarification?
I mean, yeah, somewhat. Obviously, there's commitment to public safety and employees and competitive compensation, wages, benefits, those kinds of things. I would say there's a bit of a division with regards to public safety sales tax, but that's going to be a conversation for the future. That's not going to be built into this budget anyway. So I wasn't planning on relying on public safety sales tax for the 2026 budget anyway. That'll have to be a future conversation at council. A little bit divided on what to do with the 3% cap. Seems to be some support for continuing to use reserves in some capacity as appropriate, but needing to get to a point that those are balanced, but we're not consistently planning on using those on an ongoing basis. I can tell you right now that without capturing the full 3%, we're going to have over another $1 million in cuts to make. And so I anticipate likely that my recommended budget will probably be based off of including the full 3% that the state has allocated. Or the other alternative on that is that we'll have to either dip into reserves deeper, which I was already planning on dipping into reserves to some extent, or we're going to have to probably decrease funding on the street maintenance side of things and slow down our progress on that. But my goal is to try and keep that consistent with our 2025 budget, and was hoping to add a little bit more in there. There was some touch on VERF. Right now, the VERF plan will probably be is that we will build into the VERF what we need to replace as part of the plan for the 2026 year. I don't know how much of a contribution there'll be towards future VERF needs. We'll try to do a little bit of that, but we may have a conversation with council about potentially using some of those existing reserves to help seed that fund. But anyway, that's a lot of what I'm hearing, and I will echo. I appreciate the recognition and the appreciation of the council of the work to do to get this budget to this point. I will echo that a bulk of this is due to the quality of our staff and their response to the directives. There was some unsurety, there was some grumbling. They're all busy with their other day-to-day duties in addition to preparing the budget, and they've performed phenomenally well. And so I appreciate their following the directions and doing what was asked, even though it was difficult, because I do agree that it puts us at a better place of understanding the impacts. And I do agree with Alderman Blessum's statement as well, that I think it's also helped educate our staff a little bit to better understand their budgets and the impacts, instead of just relying on the finance director or the city manager to make those decisions and then grumble and complain when we make the tough decisions. So anyway, that's the summary of what I had. Public safety employees, try to keep as much of the impact off of the taxpayers as we can. Willingness to use some reserves, and a future conversation about public safety sales tax.
Okay. Alderman Pittner, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just for, maybe it's only for my benefit, but some of the times I do my best thinking, like when I'm laying in bed or when I wake up in the middle of the night and these ideas pop into my head. Is there a way to put this on for our future agenda? Maybe our next agenda is just a miscellaneous and discussion item, so that if Harold thinks of some of these other things, we can have some of these discussions and hash these out at a public meeting.
Mayor Jones, if you like, I could put something on the July 7th council meeting But again, just a reminder that my plan is to present my recommended budget at the city council meeting on the 21st. And with some of the finance staff constraints, we're on a pretty narrow window to get this done. And as has been mentioned, we still have quite a bit of work here to do to get this balanced out, even just for the city manager recommended budget. So, but if you would like, we can put something on the agenda for the 7th if you want to have a follow-up conversation in case there's any further thoughts or input.
And just so I can be clear, I don't want to delay the work, Harold, of you and your staff and putting this, but if something comes up between now and the 7th, hey, this is one of our real life constraints that we're having. This is the decision we're having to make. Maybe you can present some of those ideas to the council and we can provide some further direction at that July 7th. I'm not sure if that's a benefit or not, so.
I will say it if I may, Mayor. So my opinion is what I'm hired for and what I'm trained for is to provide you recommendations based off of the need of the services that we have to provide to the community. So my job is to stay politically neutral. So I'm not interested in playing the games about, the state gave 1,600 and so we can raise taxes and those kinds of things. My goal, and I hope what the staff has demonstrated here over the last few days, is this is what it costs for us to provide the services. And so my recommendation will be based off of that. What does it cost to provide the services at the level that our community expects? And if we can do that and lower tax burden, then that'll be my recommendation. If it means that I have to ask for an increase in property taxes to be able to do that, then that's what I'm going to ask for. So my job is to do it and to provide the recommendation, to provide those services in the most efficient, effective way that we possibly can. After that, council can do what you're elected to do and do the politics. And if you feel that we can do without and we can cut back and hold flat or decrease or whatever else that is, then that's your decision. But I will bring forward a recommended budget that I feel, in consultation with staff, enables us to provide the services that our citizens expect now, today, and in a way that positions us better for the future in future budget years as well. And so I'll make that statement here clearly now, and I'll bring that recommended budget back here in a few weeks.
Okay. Appreciate that. Alderman Olson.
Well, I think I make this comment every year, and I'm going to make it again. Now is the opportunity for people to get in contact with us. Let us know what your priorities are. We've talked about our priorities. We need to know what your priorities are. And our email addresses and our phone numbers are all on the website. We want to hear from you. We really do. And sometimes people will say, well, you guys are busy. I don't want to bother you. No, bother us, call us, contact us, catch us at the grocery store, whatever it is. We want to know.
Absolutely. Very true. City Finance Director, David Lakefield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I would just like to take a point of privilege here maybe and point out the work of some of my staff and some of the challenges we have going on with folks being out for maternity leave or just about to be out. And it truly has been the next person up mentality. Brittany is participating now. She is going to be the go-to person after Monday, but there's been a ton of work that's been done in the last couple of months on this whole process too. And it has been a lot of work, but they've done a phenomenal job, and I have full confidence in Brittany, and hopefully we'll step up and be able to carry this through till the very end. I also just want to point out a couple of things of where we are at. The budget that we have built in today is based primarily on the flat scenario. So that was kind of the jumping off point that we started at in this budget preparation. So where we sit today is currently we still have a delta of a little over $1.7 million that we have, and that is what we would be required to levy more than what the cap allows. So we have a $1.7 million issue that we know we have to resolve somehow, whether that's further budget cuts or use of reserves or a combination thereof. But we know that we are sitting at a dollar amount that we can't attain at this point. So that's part of the challenge we will have in the next few weeks to work through that. We have been listening, as some of the comments, we've increased some of our estimates. Sales tax is a prime example. Unfortunately, our collection history is going the wrong direction. Right now, our best guess, our optimistic guess is 13.2 million per penny. We have 13.1 built into this budget. So I think, we're right where we need to be, and if that continues to slide the wrong direction, we'll have to make adjustments, and that's something that we have to do every year. We just won't have that comfort factor built in. As we sit today, we are utilizing just under $13 million in reserves in this budget. Now, I'll caveat that about half of that is NAS and flood control. It's funding that is set aside specifically for those purposes, so we can't really count that as spending down reserves, but there is a significant use of reserves in the budget as we go too. So we're trying to balance all of those things to work through this, but we're also being very cautious because we know we have some unknown factors, and primarily the big thing is what number we're going to put on that police department building coming up here in the next couple of years, because that will be, I would anticipate, being funded from reserves. So whatever that number is, that's going to make a significant impact on what we have. And we need to plan accordingly for that. Whatever number the council sets as that target, we need to make sure that we can accommodate that within that time frame. So those are just some of the challenges. To use a sports analogy, I feel like we're at the 7th inning stretch. We've done a lot of work up to this point. Now we take a little breather. We have a holiday coming up, and then we have to dig in and really get after things so we can get it through the completion.
Thanks for the site picture. That does help us a little bit, I think, to see kind of where things stand. City Manager?
Yeah, there's a final point kind of following up on Alderwoman Olson's comments about public involvement. So we will provide a lot of these materials out on our website so the public can access those. Jennifer and her team have also worked very diligently with our department heads. There's a series of budget videos that will be coming out as well in snippets so people can hopefully engage and become educated on the process, the numbers, the budget, all of that. So we continue to strive to make all that information transparent and available to the public as best we can. So look for more of that information coming out soon.
Alderman Pittner, you had something further?
Just a question for Finance Director Lakefield. Dave, prior to last year, what was the average that we would subsidize the budget with reserves?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I believe the year before last was right in the neighborhood of 2.9 million in general fund reserves, and the year prior to that, I think, was just north of $2 million.
Okay. Good to know. All right. Are there any other comments? All right, well, seeing none, again, thank you to the staff, thank you to the city manager. Good job, council members. We will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.